On August 6, 2011, a U.S. Boeing CH-47 Chinook military helicopter was shot down while transporting a quick reaction force attempting to reinforce an engaged unit of Army Rangers in Wardak province, west of Kabul, Afghanistan. The resulting crash killed all 38 people on board a 25 American Special Operations personnel, 5 United States Army National Guard and Army Reserve crewmen, 7 Afghan commandos, and 1 Afghan interpreter as well as a U.S. military working dog. It is considered the worst loss of American lives in a single incident in the Afghanistan campaign, surpassing Operation Red Wings in 2005. Prelude. In March 2009, U.S. forces established a base in Tangi Valley after it was noticed that Taliban fighters were exploiting the coalition forces' small presence in the area. U.S., French and Afghan national police forces carried out a 3-day sweep of the area, after which the area was deemed secure. In April 2011, due to a decrease in troop levels, U.S. forces abandoned the base and turned over control of the base to Afghan forces. However, Afghan forces never assumed control of the base, which was seized by the Taliban shortly after the departure of U.S. forces. U.S. forces continued to carry out operations in the area, encountering resistance from Taliban fighters on several occasions. For example, on June 8, 2011, a CH-47D was engaged from 5 to 6 locations which fired 14 RPG rounds at the helicopter, forcing the crew to abort the mission. Event timeline. After U.S. intelligence services revealed a possible location of a senior Taliban leader by the name Qari Tayyar in Tangi Valley, Wardak province, Afghanistan, a mission to apprehend or neutralize him was launched on the night of 5/August 6, 2011 from the Forward Operating Base in Logar province. It was led by a platoon of 47 U.S. Army Rangers with a troop of 17 U.S. Navy SEALs kept in reserve in case of need. The Ranger platoon was transported to the area via 2 CH-47D transport helicopters and supported by 2 AH-64 Apache helicopters and an AC-130 gunship, as well as additional intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance aircraft. The mission was deemed high risk. 22:37 local time, 18:07 Ute Zulu time. The 2 CH-47D helicopters carrying the U.S. Army Ranger platoon departed the forward operating base. 22:58 August 5, 2011, 18:28 Ute Zulu time. The 2 CH-47D helicopters successfully landed and disembarked the Rangers at the designated location near the compound where it was believed Qari Tayyar was located. The helicopters then successfully exfiltrated and returned to base. As the Rangers approached the target compound, ISR aircraft observed several people leaving the compound. 23:31 of the 2 AH-64 Apache helicopters observed and engaged a group of 8 Taliban fighters some 400 meters northwest of the target compound, killing 6. A second group was observed by ISR aircraft as well but was not engaged. 01:00 August 6, 2011, a group of Taliban fighters which initially consisted of just 2 people had by now increased in size to 9 to 10 fighters. The group then split into 2 groups. 3 Taliban fighters took a position in a stand of trees while the remaining 6 to 7 men entered a building located some 2 kilometers from the target compound. Believing that Qari Tayyar may be in the group, the Special Operations Task Force Commander and the Immediate Reaction Force Commander decided to employ reserve forces in order to engage this group as well. 01:50 The Aviation Brigade Commander approved a new landing zone which would be used to infiltrate a 17-man Navy SEAL team. 02:00 Special Operations Task Force Commander and the Immediate Reaction Force Commander determined that the Navy SEAL team should be supported with additional elements, increasing the size of the team to 33. It was decided to use both CH-47D helicopters, but the entire team would be transported in a single CH-47 with the second remaining empty in an effort to mitigate the risk of a second helicopter approaching the landing zone. 02:22-02:24 August 6, local time, 21:54 Ute Zulu time, August 5, the 2 CH-47D helicopters took off from the forward operating base. 6 minutes prior to reaching the landing zone, the empty CH-47D left formation and the CH-47D carrying the SEALs proceeded to the landing zone alone. The helicopter entered the valley from the northwest, unlike earlier that night when it entered from the south. The helicopter flew without external lighting and made its last radio transmission stating it was 1 minute away from the landing zone. The helicopter then descended to an altitude below 150 feet and slowed to a speed of 50 knots as it approached the landing zone. 0238-02 August 6:39 local time. 22:09 August 5 Ute Zulu time. The helicopter was fired upon and shot down by a previously undetected group of Taliban fighters. The group fired 2 to 3 RPG rounds from a two-story building from a location some 220 meters south of the helicopter. The second round struck one of the 3 aft rotor blades of the helicopter, destroying the aft rotor assembly. The helicopter crashed less than 5 seconds later, killing all 38 people on board. Some 30 seconds later, one of the AH-64 Apache helicopters in the area reported, "Fallen Angel." Some sources state that at the time of the showdown the 2 AH-64 Apache helicopters were engaged in tracking another Taliban group and were thus unable to provide surveillance as well as fire support to the inbound CH-47D helicopter carrying the Navy SEAL team. 02:45 The Rangers secured the initial compound and detained several people and then began to move towards the crash site. 04:12 U.S. Army Rangers reached the crash site but found no survivors. Several minutes later a 20-man Pathfinder team arrived at the site as well. By 16:25 all of the remains were taken from the crash site by a ground convoy and transported to combat outpost Saidabad. In the afternoon of August 6 a flash flood swept through the area, washing away parts of the wreckage. The CH-47D airframe does not contain black boxes, though they are often erroneously referenced in the media. The recovery of wreckage from the crash site lasted until August 9, 2011. Initial accounts: the U.S. military helicopter carrying Special Operations Forces to a night raid in the Tangi Valley of Wardak province was most likely brought down by a rocket-propelled grenade, according to military officials. General Abdul Qayyum, the police chief of Wardak, said the military helicopter was shot down around 1 a.m. Saturday after a U.S. night assault on a house in the village of Jor-e-Mekzareen in the Tangi Valley that had lasted at least 2 hours. Local witnesses reported that at least 2 helicopters had taken part in the U.S. Special Forces attack on the compound, killing 8 Afghan insurgents, but that just after the helicopter had taken off again it was fired upon from a separate position. Shahidullah Shahid, a spokesman for the provincial governor, said, "The U.S. chopper that crashed last night was shot down by the Taliban as it was taking off. A rocket fired by the insurgents hit it and completely destroyed it." A spokesman for the Taliban, Zabullah Mujahid, confirmed that 8 of the movement's fighters had been killed in the assault on the compound. He said, "They wanted to attack our Mujahideen who were in a house, but our Mujahideen resisted and destroyed a helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade." Later accounts, subsequent reports stated that the U.S. military helicopter had been delivering reinforcements to personnel of the 75th Ranger Regiment, another special operations unit, when their night raid on a compound to kill or capture a senior Taliban leader went awry. During the battle, U.S. forces observed a small group of Taliban trying to flee the scene. The group probably contained the commander and a few of his bodyguards, while the remaining Taliban fighters offered resistance in an effort to buy the group enough time to escape. In order to prevent this, U.S. forces called in for support. Other reports alleged that the Taliban had laid an elaborate trap for U.S. Special Operations Forces, luring them in with false information. A senior Afghan government official, speaking anonymously, said that Taliban commander Qari Tayyar had fed U.S. forces false information about a meeting of insurgent leaders and fighters waited for the helicopter from both sides of a steep valley. The Taliban knew which route the helicopter would take. "That's the only route," so they took position on either side of the valley on mountains, and as the helicopter approached, they attacked it with rockets and other modern weapons. It was brought down by multiple shots. Deaths: the deaths included 15 U.S. Navy SEALs from the Naval Special Warfare Development Group's Gold Squadron Team 6, 7 Afghan National Army commandos, part of Afghan National Army, 5 U.S. Naval Special Warfare Support personnel, 3 U.S. Army Reserve personnel from the 7th Battalion, 158th Aviation Regiment, 2 U.S. Navy SEALs from a West Coast-based SEAL team. 2 U.S. Army personnel from the 2nd Battalion, 135th Aviation Regiment, part of Colorado Army National Guard, 2 U.S. Air Force pararescue airmen from the 24th Special Tactics Squadron, 1 U.S. Air Force combat controller from the 24th Special Tactics Squadron, 1 Afghan civilian interpreter, 1 U.S. military working dog. The 30 American deaths represent the greatest loss of U.S. military lives in a single incident in the decade-long war in Afghanistan that began in 2001. 15 of the Navy SEALs that were killed were members of the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, while the other 2 Navy SEALs killed in the helicopter Shootdown were from an unidentified West Coast-based SEAL unit. The 5 other Navy casualties were NSW support personnel. In addition to these, 3 AFSOC operators, 1 combat controller and 2 pararescue airmen, all members of the 24th Special Tactics Squadron, died in the crash. Their deaths are the greatest single loss of life ever suffered by the U.S. Special Operations community in the 24-year history of the U.S. Special Operations Command. A source from the Navy's Special Operations community described the reaction as shock and disbelief. "There's no precedent for this. It's the worst day in our history by a mile." The previous highest U.S. death toll from a single incident in the war also came from a rocket attack on a Chinook helicopter carrying Navy SEALs during Operation Red Wings on June 28, 2005. In that incident 16 Navy SEALs and Army Special Operations troops were killed and 3 more SEALs were killed in subsequent fighting on the ground. Subsequent events: on August 10, 2011, the U.S. military claimed that the insurgent who fired the rocket-propelled grenade had been killed only 2 days afterward in a F-16 airstrike, saying only that intelligence gained on the ground provided a high degree of confidence that the person was among those killed in the airstrike from 2 days earlier, but providing no other details. During the same Pentagon news conference in which he announced that the F-16 airstrike had taken out less than 10 of the insurgents involved, International Security Assistance Force Commander in Afghanistan John R. Allen said the military investigation into the helicopter downing would also review whether small arms fire or other causes might have contributed to the downing. Following the withdrawal of U.S. forces in April 2011, Tangi Valley became a major staging area for attacks on Kabul. Tangi Valley remained under Taliban control until April 2013. When over 1,000 Afghan security forces personnel launched an offensive in an effort to clear the area of Taliban fighters. In October 2011, U.S. Central Command announced that an investigation carried out following the Shootdown concluded that all operational decisions, linked to the incident, were deemed tactically sound. The article states that the helicopter crashed after a RPG round impacted the aft rotor assembly. In 2013 Jason Chaffetz said he would hold an investigation of the United States House Oversight Subcommittee on National Security into the matter. Controversy: author Don Brown, a former United States Navy JAG officer stationed at the Pentagon, and former Special Assistant United States Attorney, released a book on May 1, 2015 titled, Call Sign Extortion 17, The Shootdown of SEAL Team 6. In his book, Don Brown examines the wartime action, tells the life stories of the service members who were lost that day and questions the official military explanation of the incident contained in the infamous Cold Report, which Don Brown contends reveals either gross incompetence or a massive cover-up. Mr. Brown indicates in his publication that the 7 Afghan soldiers aboard that helicopter may have been undercover Taliban who either maneuvered the chopper within easy range of being shot down or sabotaged it from within. He makes controversial accusations that the SEALs were sacrificed on the altar of political correctness and deliberately flown into a known Taliban hot zone. See also, List of aviation accidents and incidents in the war in Afghanistan, List of deadliest helicopter crashes, 1994 Black Hawk Shootdown incident. References. External links: for many Afghans, U.S. helicopter crash confirms Taliban momentum. Christian Science Monitor, August 7, 2011, copter downed by Taliban fire. Elite U.S. unit among dead, New York Times, August 7, 2011, Afghan chopper crash a major blow to U.S. commandos. AFP, August 8, 2011, Impact on Special Forces of Navy SEALs helicopter lost. BBC News, August 8, 2011, U.S. says Taliban who shot at U.S. helicopter dead. BBC News, August 10, 2011, photos of the fallen WJLA. ABC News, August 8, 2011, Doody releases the names of the fallen, the stories of those who lost their lives in Chinook crash. CNN, August 12, 2011, portraits of Navy SEALs killed in helicopter crash. Yahoo News, August 12, 2011, Mission Hello was secret stealth Black Hawk. Army Times, May 4, 2012.